When I was 19 years old, I started obsessing over how I could live a life of freedom. So I started a business with the aim to be able to live wherever I wanted and work whenever I wanted. By 23, I'd achieved it, and I was the unhappiest I've ever been. It all started with a plan. I wanted to be able to travel continuously and make films of my adventures. But I faced one small obstacle, which was how on earth does one afford to travel indefinitely? I'd already done the whole work for 5 months in a supermarket, travel for 5 months kind of thing. And it didn't seem worth it to me to exchange 5 months of pain for 5 months of pleasure. So I had to formulate a plan. My plan was, if I was able to travel and make a video, put that video on YouTube, I could start building an audience of people who like watching travel videos. A small percentage of those people would want to make travel videos themselves, and to those people I could sell courses on how to do that. So if that worked, then in theory, the more I traveled, the more videos I could make, the more views I'd get, the more sales I'd make, which could mean I could travel more, make more videos, get more views, make more sales, travel more, etc., etc. So the idea itself was pretty crazy, but do you know what's even crazier? It fucking worked. Part of me still can't believe it to this day. So I started working on this when I was 21, and it took 6 months for me to be able to just about afford to travel on the cheap, sharing rooms with friends, hardly spending any money, which I was totally happy to be able to do. But what I didn't expect was within 18 months, I was able to live basically wherever I wanted, spend as much as I wanted, eating out, having experiences, going on adventures, and still be saving money. In those times for me, it felt like life was just one massive adventure. I was traveling the world, hanging out with like-minded people, going on trips, adventures, experiences, activities, and capturing everything along the way. Sometimes it would be full hedonistic, crazy fun. The other times it would be stoically grinding and hustling for weeks on end to then have an amazing relief in the form of another trip or another adventure, another weekend away, whatever it might be. And it was so different to how I traveled before because this time I knew it was indefinite. The money kept coming in. I could keep affording to travel. Nothing was going to end. I never had to go back home. I'd built this system which allowed me to do this. And even more than this, people seemed to love both the videos and the courses I was making. So it was like by following my passions and exploring my creative ideas, I could inspire and help others to do the same. And looking back on it now, it's like the whole thing kind of felt surreal. I had to pinch myself fairly regularly. And it kind of felt like I'd found some kind of crack in the system, that no one else knew about. And right about then was where it started going wrong. I simply felt deeply, deeply lost. You see, my sole purpose, the reason behind everything I was striving for and trying to achieve, was to become free. And once I had achieved that freedom, I no longer had a goal. I had naively assumed that if I achieved this freedom, I could kind of laze about in this kind of eternal retirement and just feel happy all the time. But instead, I found that precisely because I had limitless choice and no purpose, that my mental health hit an all-time low. And without anything to drive me forward, I sort of floated into a void. And I was living in Barcelona at the time, which just a few months before I had been walking around marveling at the beauty of the city and feeling really connected and excited. And now I just walked around feeling lonely and alienated with life itself. Essentially, I had achieved everything that I wanted, and it made me feel like shit. I started to get waves of existential dread and anxiety, and then I started having panic attacks. I had one panic attack, then they became frequent, and that caused me to lose all of the confidence that I had been building in myself throughout this time. And I kind of assumed that this would last for a week or two, like any kind of down period, I'd pick myself back up and be able to kind of push through it and it would be fine. But it lasted months and months and months and months. And then after a while, I really started wondering if anything was ever going to be the same as it was. And what was extra weird about this state was that because I had everything, I didn't have anything to blame my unhappiness on. You know, there's always something, if you're unhappy, you kind of think, well, I need more money, or I need to see more friends, or if only I could travel or whatever, right? You kind of blame it on stuff. But I couldn't find a single thing to blame it on. And so that made me then even more deeply unhappy than before. And in reaction to this, my mind shifted and a really toxic belief firmly embedded itself in my psyche, which was, if this is what success feels like, then I don't want success. I became completely cynical of life itself. I hardly made any videos during this time. I stopped traveling and I stopped putting time and attention into my business. I stopped growing my business and it started to wither and die. You know, the very thing that got me here, I just stopped taking care of it. I just couldn't believe that all of my energy and joy was slipping away from me and didn't seem like it was going to come back. And of course, in my desperation, I did take measures to fix myself. I went and got therapy, which to be fair did help quite a bit. I was also trying boxing, yoga, keeping healthy habits, doing all the right stuff, eating healthy to try and kind of maintain like a healthy mind or anything. It wasn't like somebody could easily say, oh, look, you know, you need to start exercising and you need to start eating healthy and that basic stuff, sleeping right. I was doing all of those things and it didn't work. Nothing felt the same as before. I had lost my spark, and the effects of this experience lasted a long time. I was in this state for around 2 years, wondering where on earth I was going to wash up. But eventually, enough was enough. On New Year's Day 2019, I had some deep chats with my brother and a good friend. And I set myself 3 goals. I would work out for 1 hour per day. I would learn Spanish for 1 hour every day. And I would learn guitar 1 hour every day. And I would do these things regardless of how I felt. I decided to completely stop caring about how I felt. After all, who actually cared if I was depressed or anxious? It was ultimately up to me to pull myself out of this. And I realized in some ways that this depression or anxiety or whatever it was, it still wasn't an excuse for inaction. And so it began. Despite it being New Year and having all this new plan and everything, my body and mind was still not excited and energized to do these things. So every single morning, I didn't want to get out of bed. I wanted to laze around and kind of wallow in my misery. And it was rare that I had any days that I'd wake up excited. But I simply took the actions. And slowly but surely, it started working. I started coming up with kind of this new life philosophy that I was living like a student, as if I had exams. You know, I was furiously learning stuff. But I kind of knew the secret, which is I didn't have any exams. Like there was nothing to do it for other than the act of just doing it. It started slowly but surely to get me feeling excited and kind of have this kind of grit that I hadn't really experienced before. And 3 months later, I'd made a big shift. 6 months later, I felt like a completely different person. I was taking music way more seriously, which had always been a passion of mine, but it had been something I'd kind of put on the back burner. My Spanish had improved a lot, which allowed me to communicate much more fluently with the culture that I was living in. And I was in the best shape of my life, and my body no longer felt like this kind of panic attack prison, and I started to feel strong and healthy. So was anything ever the same? Did I get back to that same feeling I had before? Was I that same person? No, everything had changed, but I had managed to climb out of the hole, and I was kind of rebuilding myself and my life as something new and different than it ever was before. After all, the person that I used to be got me into this state in the first place, so why would I want to be that person again? And through this experience, I learned that freedom alone wasn't the answer for me. The only thing that happened when I had freedom as my goal was that when I achieved it, I felt completely lost. And what I found was there were 2 new key players in my happiness equation: responsibility and meaning. Introducing the tree of life: freedom, meaning, and responsibility. We all know that money and time create freedom. But without responsibility, freedom becomes meaningless and we can drift off into this kind of void. Interestingly, to obtain money and time, you often need to take on more responsibility. So you need responsibility to create freedom. So it's a loop, and the key here is not to cut the cycle by losing the sense of responsibility that created the freedom in the first place. But before you think, I have loads of responsibility, I have to go to work and get up on time, etc., etc., there's an important caveat here, because there are two types of responsibility. There is external responsibility and internal responsibility. External responsibility looks like showing up to a job on time because you get fired if you don't, ensuring your kids go to school because it's illegal not to, and taking your dog for a walk because otherwise there'll be a mess on the floor. Internal responsibility looks like being proactive to work towards meaningful goals, whether that's in the framework of a job or building your own framework in the form of a business. Being proactive to provide the best you possibly can for your family and loved ones out of the care for other people, and adhering to healthy habits so you can live a good long life and show up as your best self. So you can probably see the difference here. External responsibility comes from necessity, and internal responsibility comes from a sense of meaning, which creates proactivity. Meaning is the all-important third ingredient that is missing from this equation. Meaning is a powerful reason to take on responsibility. Meaning is the why behind the freedom that you desire. So in my example, to gain the freedom that I initially craved, I took on the internal responsibility to get better at skill sets, to learn skill sets, to build a business that then taught those skill sets to others and created value. In exchange for that, I got money and time. So in exchange for responsibility, I got freedom. So I'd used my sense of internal responsibility to gain freedom for myself. But once I had achieved that freedom, I lost all of my sense of purpose and couldn't see any meaning. So I was left with zero internal responsibility. I had no proactivity. I was only left with the external responsibility of performing basic tasks like paying my rent when I was abroad, showing up to calls for my business, etc. And I got stuck in the void. I got stuck in this loop of external responsibility and nothing else, desperately trying to find meaning and purpose, but failing. And because I lost the meaning behind my freedom, I floated into the void. And the void is purely external responsibility. There's no motivation, drive, purpose, happiness there. It's just, I have to do this. Oh, I have to show up to do this. I have to show up to do this. And in my case, I didn't really have much of that anyway, so I really didn't have anything to do. So I needed to gain internal responsibility again. And I ended up creating that through meaning. Meaning creates internal responsibility, which creates money and time and freedom. So let's go over how I was able to create meaning through the 3 ways to create powerful meaning in your life. Number 1, realize that you are irreplaceable. What better place to start than reading Man's Search for Meaning by Viktor Frankl. Now, this book was one of the key things that helped me get through the dark time, because Viktor Frankl was a survivor of concentration camps in World War II. So reading this book not only obviously gave me a perspective of what my dark time actually was, it was basically completely incomparable to the suffering that some people experience around the world, historically or even today. So it gave me perspective. But the other thing was, one of the key realizations he had during his experiences in the concentration camps was that a creative pursuit could create so much meaning in one's life that it was able to drive them through almost any amount of suffering imaginable and be one of the core reasons behind somebody's will to live. And this came from a sense of responsibility. He said, "One should not search for an abstract meaning of life. Everyone has his own specific vocation or mission in life to carry out a concrete assignment which demands fulfillment. Therein he cannot be replaced, nor can his life be repeated. Thus everyone's task is as unique as is his specific opportunity to implement it." I actually ended up writing that quote down on a big piece of paper and sticking it on the wall. He goes on to say, "This uniqueness and singleness which distinguishes each individual and gives a meaning to his existence has a bearing on creative work as much as it does on human love. When the impossibility of replacing a person is realized, it allows the responsibility which a man has for his existence and its continuance to appear in all its magnitude. A man who becomes conscious of the responsibility he bears towards a human being who affectionately awaits for him, or to an unfinished work, will never be able to throw his life away. He knows the why for his existence and will be able to bear almost any how." A meaningful creative project gives all of the internal responsibility or proactivity that one will ever need. When we discover or cultivate a passion for a creative project which requires time and effort to achieve, we orient our minds towards meaning. We align ourselves to a future goal that we deeply care about, and not only along the way find life more meaningful, but we're also much more able to endure hardship and suffering in pursuit of that goal. You could say that because I achieved my slightly superficial goal of freedom itself, that I was no longer able to endure the hardships and suffering that life presents. But when I had a goal, I was choosing my own hardships to battle, which was building a business and pushing through all of the obstacles and mental blocks that presents. Further than this, and perhaps even more important, Frankl emphasizes that one's own uniqueness is the very thing that gives meaning to a creative project. I fucking love this because it completely goes around and gets rid of the notion of comparison. So comparison is the killer of creativity. Toxic thoughts like this take the form of, why should I even make videos if this guy makes them twice as good? Why should I even make music if all the best music was already made in the 60s and 70s? But it's our uniqueness that gives meaning to a project. Trust me, literally no one can make videos like you. And that's not because you're the best out there. It's because your life experience combined with your DNA, combined with living in this specific era in this moment in time, means that you can create a video that no one else on the planet can. That in itself, combined with some kind of inner calling to do it, is all the reason you could ever need to get it done. Number 2, acknowledge the pain of never reaching your potential. Reaching one's potential, or at least reaching it as much as one can in this life, is a pretty bulletproof source of motivation, drive, purpose, and for me it was a key source of meaning that got me out of the rut I was in. And I see meaning in this not only because I want to create better art and better work and reach my potential in that sense, but also because I know that to fulfill one's potential is a lifelong journey. And through that journey, one's very experience of life itself will change dramatically. So that's something that I can always tap into as like a reserve of energy, no matter how down I'm feeling. It's like if you keep on pushing to reach your potential, you're going to become really good at something. And if you're really good at something, or like the best in the world at something even, the whole way that you see life itself will completely change. Like your experience of this life will change. So here's a thought experiment. Imagine you were the best, or like one of the best in the world at a specific discipline that inspires you. So that could be cooking, playing guitar, sports, coding, consulting, whatever it is. I bet if you were that complete expert, you'd probably see life in a very different way. However, the real shift comes when you reframe it in a slightly different way. And that is, imagine you reached the end of your life and you hadn't fulfilled your potential. You hadn't become the person you could have. You haven't had the impact that you could have. It sounds quite a lot more painful like that. And from that perspective, you've probably got quite a lot of work to do. In fact, if you deeply understood that and integrated that, you might never get bored again. Now, as an add-on to this, to actually be able to work towards reaching your potential, you need a degree of freedom. Whether it's the freedom to work on something you're passionate about, or the freedom to change to a job that better suits you. Both of these freedoms come from having options. And having options usually comes from having money, time, or specific skill sets and specific experience. Just because you have loads of money and time doesn't mean you can get your dream job, for example. And if you don't have all the specific experience you need to play guitar and be a guitarist, you can't tour the world playing guitar in front of thousands of people. You need those skills and you need the experience to be able to do that. So even if you're a really rich dude with loads of money and time, you don't necessarily have all of the options out there on the things that you want to do. You might have to build experience and skill sets to be able to do those things. So what I'm getting at here is if you don't have the freedom right now to reach your potential, you first need to take on the responsibility to gain the freedom or options that you need so then you can pursue fulfilling your potential. Going back to my example, now that a few more years have passed, I now have a partner and I want to build a future for us. But I know that if I don't have my shit together now, the extra responsibilities that I'll take on could well crush my freedom. And without that freedom, I won't have the ability to pursue and reach the fulfillment of my creative potential. And I know I have a lot of art and creations left in me. So to be able to work on those projects, I need to work hard now to gain the money or time or skill sets or experience that I need to have the freedom to keep pursuing the fulfillment of my potential. Because a life where I don't fulfill my potential scares the shit out of me. Pressure is what turns the useless lump of coal into diamonds. And that pressure is responsibility that's been put on you or that you've taken on. And mixed with freedom, it's awesome. The best skill that I learned to create freedom for myself was the ability to talk to camera. And that's exactly why I teach it inside the 30-day Talking on Camera Challenge. The link is in the description if you're interested in checking that out. Way number 3, turn your existing external responsibilities into internal responsibilities. Another figure with powerful ideas on responsibility and meaning is Jordan Peterson. One of his chief ideas is that taking responsibility for your own life is morally one of the best things that you can possibly do. If you get your life together, pick up a heavy load and work with it, you're doing an amazing job for yourself, for those around you, and for society. But what if you already have a heavy load? What if you already have responsibilities? You have to pay your rent, you have to get up on time for work, you have to take your dog for a walk, you have to clean the dishes after eating. Sure, but these are external responsibilities. The magic here is that if you add meaning to this equation, i.e. if you feel deeply that you have a meaningful purpose to achieve, then these external responsibilities become internal responsibilities. So let's say, for example here, you were a musician who's just moved to the big city to pursue his dreams. So the first thing you do, you get an apartment, set up yourself with paying some rent in the big city. You get a job in a cafe to help pay that rent, and you join a band. But suddenly, your life has quite a few external responsibilities. Paying rent, turning up to work, showing up to band practice on time, playing gigs for barely any money, etc., etc. So without meaning here and a sense of purpose, all these external responsibilities could very quickly get you down. But with meaning attached, these responsibilities become internal. So let's say again that you found meaning in fulfilling your life's creative potential. You deeply visualize and embed this meaning into your body, your mind, your emotions, your psyche. You now enjoy your job a lot more. You work harder to show up there early. You do the best job you can to receive tips because you link that job so strongly to allowing you to pursue your creative dream. You turn up to band practice with a spark in your eye because it's strongly linked to a future goal. Again, it's deeply connected to fulfilling your creative potential. You essentially go from reactive, i.e. life is happening to me, to proactive, i.e. I'm actively participating in my destiny. So if you created this meaning for yourself, as Peterson would say, you would have a clear hell to run away from, which is wasting your life and potential, and a clear heaven to run towards, which is fulfilling your potential. If you want to acquire the high-value skill set of being able to talk to camera confidently and authentically, then I'd highly encourage you to check out the 30-day Talking on Camera Challenge and start working towards creating the freedom that you need to take on internal responsibility, get yourself money, time, skills, experience to create freedom and have a sense of meaning, empowering the whole thing. With that said, until next time, stay creative. Bye-bye.